Is there really a difference between a good thing and a God thing? Hi guys, I'm Vivacious Hannah and welcome to this video. So this is going to be a collab with my friend Kirsten Abernathy. She has a great channel as well. She does awesome covers and she just really digs deep. So I will link her video below. Go ahead and check it out. I'll also probably link it at the end so you guys can watch my video until then. I honestly don't remember how this idea popped into my head, like, you know, good versus a God thing, but I really feel like it's something that I need to talk about. You know, because there are certainly good things in our lives, but sometimes we need to let go of those to make way for a God thing. And I, of course, have some examples. So just think about Moses. You know, he was the Pharaoh's son, basically. And then you skip forward and he's leading everyone through the desert. So it's kind of like he went from being a prince to a servant. And of course, saying it just like that kind of almost sounds like a demotion, but think about it. And of course, I'm sure you guys know the story that those who were obeying God were slaves to Egypt. And I'm sure it was a good life for Moses because, you know, he probably really didn't need to worry about anything. I mean, if you're a king's son, I feel like you can probably like demand anything and you'll get it. And yet he ended up as a servant for God. And of course, 40 years in the desert kind of sounds terrible. Like, who is going to willingly spend 40 years in a desert with a bunch of people that keep disobeying the commands that God gives you? Like, who would willingly do that? But you see, Moses played a bigger role in God's plan than he could have played, or really would have played, as the Pharaoh's son. Because really anyone in a political stance like that can do so much, but it's not always for good. And yet, as he was leading everyone through the desert, he was really leading all the people in the desert to find God. And of course, only 2 made it into the promised land, which, I mean, he had thousands of people, maybe even, I think some have said like 1 million or more people following him in the desert. And for only 2 to make it to the promised land, like, that's insane. But that's not to say that these people, you know, didn't necessarily find God along the way, because of course they built the golden calf and they worshipped other gods and they disobeyed the one true God. But really, who's to say that they didn't find salvation? I don't know, the rules back in the Old Testament are way over my head. They're so profound, so it could be that maybe they didn't receive salvation, but I obviously didn't go that deep into my studies. I was just, you know, kind of viewing this from Moses's perspective. So I know that probably wasn't the best example, but I also want to move on to Mary, the mother of Jesus. And I talked about this in my video, I think it's called Faith and God's Will, but you know, she had a pretty good life planned. Like, she was gonna marry Joseph, you know, this strong, stable carpenter. I'm sure she pictured a great life together, because what else do you do when you're getting married? And of course that was a good plan. There was good in that plan. It altogether was good. And yet that was not necessarily taken away, but more added onto by the birth of Jesus. And even though she was mocked for not saving her virginity, it still led way to something much better, which, like, without Jesus, would any of us really be here? Jesus is the way we find true life, and without that, I don't know how any of us would be able to live. So clearly, that made way for God's plan. And then one more example, and this is the one that actually, yeah, this is what inspired this video, is Paul. So back in Acts, I can't remember the exact chapter, it's somewhere within 20 and 29, some chapter in the 20s. He's going around preaching, testifying to so many people, telling them what God has done in his life, and that's an awesome thing, right? But a life of preaching is awesome. That is so good for the kingdom, and yet he ended up in prison. But God still used that, and he used it to reach the people who were possibly unreachable. And I'm pretty sure in the middle of the night, angels ended up like busting him out of this prison. And of course the guards kind of freaking out, like, what's happening? Where are these people going? What am I gonna do? Huh? And that gives Paul the opportunity to talk about his faith to this person that he otherwise probably wouldn't have known. And it really reminds me a lot of Richard Wurmbrand, who, if you guys know like Voice of the Martyrs pretty well, you'll probably recognize this name. He was basically this preacher who was following God like so closely, and then he was taken into prison. And I just remember growing up and hearing these stories about how he would be tortured in prison. And you know, these guards and these guys would be beating him, trying to get him to, I actually don't know what they were trying to make him do. Maybe deny Jesus or something, I'm not sure. Should have done my research. And they'd take a lunch break. They'd ask him all sorts of questions about Jesus, finish up lunch and be like, well, now we have to start beating you again. And I remember this guy said that he would not have it any other way. How profound is that? I mean, I don't know about you, but I do not want to be beat in prison. But if that's what it takes for God's will to be done, I am here for it. Now, I am not welcoming death or beatings, but I'm just saying, God, like, use me however you want to. So he also gave up a good thing for a God thing. And as I was, reading into these stories again and kind of doing my research, I was realizing following God's will requires us to step into the unknown. Only God knows what could happen in our futures. We have no idea. I mean, it's kind of fun to daydream and be like, what would happen if I was an actor and everyone knew my name? Or like, what if I was an artist and I could draw these incredible paintings and like, I guess you don't draw a painting, you paint a painting. I'm just gonna stop that right there. I do not know my art terms. But really, it requires us to step into that unknown and trust that God will find us there and lead us wherever he needs us to be. A God thing almost always requires a sacrifice of some sort. So, like Moses sacrificed his position in government, but not necessarily government, but like, I guess his position in the kingdom to become a servant. And of course, these sacrifices can be made whether you know it or not. And Mary sacrificed this quiet, humble life with Joseph to be the mother of Jesus. Paul sacrificed a somewhat probably comfortable preaching environment to go to prison and preach to those people. And I just really want to encourage you guys that sometimes those sacrifices can lead to fantastic things. I hope I can find this little cartoon. If I can, I'll put it like right over here, so I'll scoot over. But it's like this little girl holding on to a teddy bear and she's like, kind of like, Jesus, I don't want to give this up. But then behind his back, he has an even bigger one. And I really believe that's how it is with us. We hold on to these things that we think are good, and they honestly can be good. They can be great. But what if by holding on to those things, we're letting go of what God has in store for us? And for those of you who have been liking my Office references, here's another one for you. What I'm referring to is Pam. She was dating and engaged to Roy for the longest time. She got the Dundee for longest engagement, and Roy, of course, was probably a nice guy. I mean, I feel like we really only see his bad sides. I mean, come on, dude, you're trying to attack Jim? Are you kidding me? And Pam, in a way, kind of had to sacrifice Roy, not like that, and not in the sense of like actually like kill him sacrifice, but she just had to sacrifice like this relationship with Roy so that she could find this awesome relationship with Jim. And that kind of puts it into maybe more understandable terms for us on how we can have these great good things going on in our lives, and yet there could be greater things in store if we just let go. So I'm not saying that you need to let go. That's really something that you guys have to figure out in your own minds, because you could already be in God's will. I'm just really trying to put this idea in your head so you guys can kind of chew on it a little bit. So anyways, that is all I really have for this video. So again, I will be linking Kirsten's video below and somewhere on the screen. So be sure to check that out. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Comment down below if you have any thoughts or any questions for me. Subscribe if you're interested, and I will see you guys next time. Now go out there and make someone smile today.